Wong. I'm Monique Kilgore.
I'm Samantha Seneviratne.
I'm Nick Sharma.
Welcome to the Cookie Swap Special.
Super important to make sure that we sift so that way there's no lumps in our dough. And here I'm just going to use chopsticks. It's a handy kitchen helper. Chopsticks are really versatile in the kitchen. They're not just for eating sushi. Hi everyone, I'm Angel Wong and I currently host the YouTube channel Angel Wong's Kitchen, where I showcase cooking tutorials on how to make Asian and Taiwanese recipes. I used to be a project manager here, and I was doing that for several years, and I decided that I wanted a change in career. So back in 2013, I decided for fun to post a YouTube video on bubble tea, and I really enjoyed posting YouTube videos, so I continued to do it. I realized that, hey, I really love doing this, and this is such a great career to have. Of course, I was scared to leave a full-time job, but during that time, both my grandparents were getting older, and they needed more help from me, so I was actually a caregiver during that time that I was doing YouTube videos. Being Taiwanese American, I really wanted to promote my heritage. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of Taiwanese food here in Seattle, and so I thought it would be great to kind of share the recipes that my grandparents had. So I actually learned by watching my grandma in the kitchen. One time, she served me her famous fried rice dish, and she put a ton of green onions in it. And unfortunately, at the time, when I was younger, I hated green onions. So I said, Grandma, I don't want the green onions in the fried rice. And so she was so sweet and so kind. She literally picked out every single green onion in the fried rice bowl, gave it to me, and then said, next time, if you want fried rice without green onions, you should learn to cook with me. And so that's kind of how I started to learn to cook with her. Today I have a very special guest with me in my kitchen. I have my grandma here today, and she is going to help us make a Taiwanese style thin noodle, also known in Taiwanese as mi suang. Grandma, can you come say hello? Nanai lai today. Okay, so she's a tad bit camera shy, but I'll have her come up in a minute. So when you go to Taiwan, it's pretty much an unspoken rule that if you go there, you should go to the airport, buy a box of pineapple cakes, and bring them back for people. They're that popular. And for my cookie, I've actually modified the Taiwanese pineapple cakes. So we're going to be making a top layer and a bottom layer, which is similar to the Taiwanese pineapple cake shortbread. And then inside, we're going to layer it with that pineapple jam. It's sweet and yet a little bit tart. First, we're going to make the pineapple filling, and you should have approximately 1 cup of the drained pineapple. So put that into a saucepan along with your sugar and lemon juice, and cook over medium heat for about 10 minutes or until the mixture is thickened. While that's cooling, we're going to go ahead and put together the dry ingredients. So we're going to sift together the flour, the cake flour, and the salt. And I'm actually using cake flour in this recipe because that's going to lighten everything up and make a lighter cookie. We want to cream together the butter and the sugar. And I like to put my butter and start it on low for about 30 seconds first, and that just kind of breaks everything up. And this is a really important step because it helps to aerate the butter, which makes for a more tender cookie. And then I'll go ahead and slowly pour in my sugar. Once the sugar is combined, I'll go ahead and turn the mixer on to medium, and then let that whip together for about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to add the eggs one at a time, and then we're going to add a little bit of milk powder. I'm actually going to lower the mixer speed, and then I'm going to add the flour in. That way everything doesn't explode everywhere. Then I'll go ahead and turn the mixer speed on higher. So it still looks a little bit sticky. Gosh, it kind of looks like a little bit of frosting. Textured frosting is how I would describe it. So I've got that wrapped in plastic wrap. And now we're gonna just chill this in the fridge for at least 30 minutes until it's firmed up. Let it come to room temperature before rolling out. I'm just gonna lightly flour the countertops. That's looking like it's about a 1/4 inch thick. Now that the dough is rolled out, I'm going to go ahead and use my 2 cookie cutters. I've got a tree-shaped cookie cutter. For the top cookie, I'm going to do the tree, and then I'm going to do a circle shape. And I'm just going to do the circle shape right in the center there. We're going to put the cookies in a preheated oven at 350 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. You can tell that they're done when the edges are slightly golden brown. I will take 1 tree-shaped cookie, put that on the bottom, then I'm going to take a little bit of the pineapple jam, spread that gently over the cookie. Now I'm going to take another tree-shaped cookie, this one with a whole circle in the center, and put that right on top. And they're done. If you want, you can also dust a little powdered sugar on top for an extra touch. Look how cute they are. They're so adorable. When I was younger, my mom sent me back to Taiwan for the summers for my grandparents to take care of me. And in Taiwan, they lived in a small town called Kaohsiung, and it's a super small farming town, and they're basically farmers. So I lived with them for several months out of the year when I was younger, and it was basically me and them, and they raised me. It was such a beautiful small town. I remember walking on the street and you could see rice paddy fields. It was so green and pretty. You never see that here, at least not in Seattle. What I remember the most was that they were very loving, and even though that we didn't have a lot of money, they made sure that I ate well. So holidays with my family were great. We would always have meals served family style, and there would be all my aunts and uncles together. Everybody would come over, and it was almost like potluck style. We would cook our own meals, but then our friends and family would come over and bring their own kind of specialties, whether it be fish or fresh seafood or fresh vegetables that they grew from their garden. And that was pretty much every holiday tradition that we had, whether it be Chinese New Year or during Christmas time. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away from colon cancer back in August. He was 93, and so now it's just me and my grandma. So my grandpa's had this tea set for about 20-30 years now, and one of his favorite things to do is host afternoon tea. It wasn't a formal or fancy thing, it was more of an everyday ritual where he would get out his tea set and brew oolong tea for anybody who was there, and most of the time it was me who was there. So every time I make shortbread cookies, it reminds me of the times that I spent with my grandfather having tea and cookies in the afternoon. So the matcha shortbread cookies are delicious. It's my take on a traditional shortbread cookie, but we're adding matcha powder to it. And matcha, if you haven't had it before, it's kind of got that grassy flavor to it. It's bright, vibrant green. It's delicious. It's one of my favorite Asian ingredients to cook with. I'm going to sift together the flour, the cornstarch, and the salt. Matcha powder can be clumpy sometimes, so you'll definitely want to make sure that you sift it properly. Next, we're going to cream together the butter and the sugar, letting the butter incorporate. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the sugar. Add the sifted flour mixture. Again, I like to turn my mixer on low, and then slowly add the dry ingredients to the mixer. Once that's fully incorporated, you can go ahead and increase the speed just a little bit, but be careful not to overmix the dough. So the dough kind of feels Play-Doh-y right now, and that is what we're looking for. So I'm just going to wrap this up, and we're going to put it in the fridge. Now that the dough has been sitting out for about 5 to 10 minutes, we can go ahead and roll it out. Roll the dough into a 1/4 inch thick, and if the edges start to crack, I'm just going to go ahead and use the palm of my hands to mold it back together. I've got 3 different sizes of star-shaped cookie cutters. You can also use leaf shape or tree shape, which is very popular. I would just stay away from super complex, intricate cookie cutters because shortbread does tend to spread. And when I press the cookie cutter in, I like to give it a little bit of a wiggle, and that just helps so I can remove the cookie easier. We're going to place them in a preheated oven at 350 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. Keep an eye on them after 10 minutes to just see when they've just started to turn golden brown. While they're cooling, you can also take some decorating sugar and put some on the top of half of the cookies. And because we deserve a little extra treat this holiday season, I'm going to dress up my cookies dipped in dark chocolate. Take some dark chocolate chips, melt them in the microwave. Every 30 seconds or so, go ahead and give it a quick stir to make sure the chocolate's not burning. Let them cool on a parchment sheet. I usually wait about half an hour or so, depending on how warm it is in your kitchen, but usually it takes about half an hour before I go ahead and serve it. It's tempting though to eat them first. Wow, these matcha shortbread cookies look amazing. I love the chocolate dipped ones and the sugar dusted ones. These matcha shortbread cookies bring back good memories for me and my family, and I hope they bring new memories for you and yours. Happy holidays and seasoned greetings from Angel Wong's Kitchen.
This is a workout. My arms are on fire. But it is definitely worth it. Ooh, child. Hi, I'm Monique, and I'm the chef and creator behind Divas Can Cook. Divas Can Cook is a Southern food blog. We have over currently 900,000 YouTube subscribers, and we are growing rapidly. When I started Divas Can Cook, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was making and selling dog clothes online. I had this dog clothes boutique, so I'm like, okay, I was making and selling dog clothes, but I wasn't passionate about it, you know? So I'm like, I need something that's gonna give me energy. I didn't feel energized by it. So like literally I sat down at the kitchen table and I started thinking of, okay, what makes me feel alive, you know, happy. And so I just started food, naturally food. So I started, you know, making a list of all kind of food careers, food things I could do with the food. Growing up, something was always cooking, always baking, simmering. My grandmother cooked dinner every single day, which, yeah, I appreciate that now because I'm not doing that. I cannot think of anybody in my family who does not like to cook. We all like eating, so we like cooking too. I started Divas Can Cook in 2009, just kind of, you know, sharing recipes that I really liked. And then I was talking to another YouTuber. She was like a really big YouTuber. And she was like, you should start doing videos. Videos is where it's at.
Today on Divas Can Cook, we are making the biggest, softest, fluffiest cinnamon rolls I have ever had in my entire life.
I have been working on my first cookbook for many years, and I'm so excited that I'm about to release it very, very soon. Being able to turn this into a career has been like life-changing. Honestly, it feels like a dream. It doesn't seem real. Like online, you can turn any little passion into a career. Anything. You like playing with puppies, you can turn it into a career. Like really, you can. You can, and it's crazy, but I'm blessed and I love it. I love it so much.
These red velvet snowball cookies are the perfect comfort food for your holidays. The first step, I have some butter in a bowl, and now I'm going to add in some butter flavored shortening. I'm using this shortening because this will really result in a nice and tender finished cookie. So now we're just going to cream together the butter and the shortening. Now we're going to cream this together just until it is really fluffy, kind of like this right here. Okay, so now I have all of of my ingredients to make my cookies, but we're going to start by mixing in our wet ingredients first. And we're going to start with our egg right in. We're going to mix this up just until it is well combined. Okay, now I'm going to add some buttermilk, some vinegar, and my vanilla extract. The reason why I add vinegar to this recipe because I really want to bump up that tanginess that is classic with red velvet. And we're going to mix it all up until it's combined. Okay, now for the fun part, the red food coloring. Now you can absolutely get creative and use different colors like green or blue. Today we're using red for red velvet. So now we're going to mix this all up. And be sure to scrape down the sides of your bowl with your spatula. Okay, now we're going to whisk up our dry ingredients. We're going to start with our flour. Next, we're going to add in our unsweetened cocoa powder. And then we're going to add in our salt. So now we're just going to whisk this all around until it is well combined. Okay, now to sweeten things up a bit, we're going to add in some powdered sugar. I'm using powdered sugar instead of granulated sugar because this is really going to give our cookies that nice melt in your mouth texture that we're looking for. Now we're going to combine the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. Now I like to do this a little bit at a time just to make it more manageable. To mix this up, you want to make sure that you're really scraping down the sides of the bowl. I'm using a spatula instead of my mixer because I don't want to overwork this dough. And look at that beautiful red color. I love the color. Now this is a little bit of a workout, but it is definitely worth it. Okay, now I'm going to cover this up with plastic wrap and place it in the fridge for 1 hour. Chilling this dough will prevent it from spreading out in the oven. Now we're just going to scoop out our dough, and I'm using a tablespoon sized cookie scoop just to keep these cookies nice and even. And I like to roll them around. This is such a fun cookie to do with kids because this dough, it feels like Play-Doh. So you can get the little kids to roll it around and make little red velvet snowballs. So cute. Okay, now we're going to bake these at 350 for 12 to 14 minutes. These cookies smell amazing. They have been sitting on the pan for about 2 minutes, and now we're going to move on to our snowball coating, which is melted butter and powdered sugar. Now we want to go ahead and dip these cookies while they're still warm, and that will help the coating stick to it much better. So first we're going to dip the cookies into the butter. Make sure you have it coated all the way around, the excess drip off, and then we're going to place it into our powdered sugar and completely coat it. And I like to really pack it on there just to make sure that it's really going to stick to the cookie. Place it on the cooling rack to finish cooling off completely. Now I like to use one hand for the butter and then another hand to coat the cookies in the powdered sugar. That way it won't get clumpy. We don't want clumps. Alright, so now we're going to let these cool off completely, and then we're going to dip them one more time in that powdered sugar. Now dipping them in the powdered sugar again just makes them extra festive. They look like little snowballs. Okay, we are all done. I'm going to wash my hands and then we're going to plate these up. So now we're going to place our cookies on a festive platter. And what I love about these cookies is that they make such great gifts. And to store these cookies, you want to place them in between layers of parchment paper and place them in an airtight container. And we're all done. Look at how cute they are. Now look at the inside. Look how beautiful that red coloring is. And now my favorite part. Now this powdered sugar can be a little messy, but it is so worth it. I've had a lot of successes in the past 10 years, but one of my favorite was meeting President Barack Obama. But honestly, let me tell you, what really made me feel like, oh my gosh, I have arrived,
was when I started getting emails from just like people saying like, oh, my son was so shy. We couldn't get him to try anything, but he's been watching your videos and now he feels confident to like sign up for a cooking class. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can influence people, you know? That's when I'm like, okay, this is what I like right here. That right there.
One of my favorite memories as a child was coming home from school and smelling those fresh homemade brownies. So when I got old enough, one of the first recipes I wanted to learn how to make was homemade brownies. So I decided to take my favorite brownie recipe and give it a holiday twist by adding peppermint and turning it into a cookie. So what I have here is a bowl of dark chocolate chips and butter. I have melted this in a bowl in the microwave in 20-second increments. And you want to melt this just until it is nice and smooth and silky, just like this right here. So I have a bowl of sugar here. I'm going to add in my eggs, an egg yolk, my vanilla extract, some baking powder, and a little bit of salt. So now we're going to mix this all up, and we're going to mix it until it's nice and light and creamy. That way we will have a nice and chewy brownie cookie. And this will take about 3 to 5 minutes. You want the texture to be nice and light and whipped just like this right here. Next, we're going to fold in the melted chocolate and butter. Now you want to stir this up just until all of that chocolate is mixed in. You have a nice uniform color. And next we're going to add in our flour. That's just regular all-purpose flour. And then we're going to add in some unsweetened cocoa powder. I like to mix this by hand. You can use your mixer if you like. I prefer to do it by hand, just because that's the way I was taught. Now you want to make sure you fold this in really good because we want to make sure all of those dry ingredients are well combined. So now we're going to let this chill in the fridge for 1 hour. So we have our chilled dough right here. I'm going to use this 1 tablespoon cookie scoop to scoop out the dough. Now this dough is very thick, so you may need to coat your cookie scoop with a little bit of cooking oil if it starts to stick. Now if you have trouble getting this dough out, you can use a spoon to kind of pry it out very gently. Now I'm placing these cookies about 2 inches apart on the baking sheet just so they don't spread into each other. And now we're going to bake these at 350 for 8 to 10 minutes, and while these cook, I'm going to work on my peppermint topping. My cookies are out of the oven. I let them sit in the pan for about 2 minutes before placing them on a wire rack to finish cooling completely. Meanwhile, we're going to work on our peppermint topping. Alright, we're going to start by adding our peppermint into a pudding. We're going to crush this up just until it is nice and powdery. Now once we have that all grinded up, we're going to place it into a bowl. So next we're going to move to our melted milk chocolate. I'm going to add in just a little bit of peppermint extract, and that is the key to really bringing in those festive holiday flavors. So now it's time to bring it all together. My cookies have cooled off completely, so now I'm just going to drizzle it with this melted chocolate. And you can also use white chocolate instead of the milk chocolate, which is what I'm using. So now that you have all of the cookies drizzled with chocolate, we're going to sprinkle on some peppermint. Now that my chocolate has hardened, we're just going to plate these cookies up. Now I love making these cookies for my family, and I hope that you will too.
So here are some biscotti that I baked off already, so they're completely cool. And I can put them on this nice little serving plate. Pretend I'm having company. I miss having company over. I grew up baking when I was really little. My mom didn't want me to have, she said she wouldn't buy me an easy bake oven, even though I wanted one so desperately. And so I just started baking with the real oven when I was really, really little. So I think for my whole life, sweets and baking and pastry have sort of just been in my blood. I knew I was gonna do this my whole life. When I was in culinary school, I got my start in food media, interning at the test kitchen of Seneviratne magazine. Now I develop recipes and host cooking videos for outlets like Bon Appetit and Food 52. I've also written 3 cookbooks. I feel very, very lucky to be able to do it and make a living. It's pretty cool. Growing up, food was obviously really important. My family is from Sri Lanka, so in America, my mom cooked a whole range of foods, from curries and then to American classics, and that was really impressive to me, and it always made me want to travel and learn more about food from all different cultures and countries. And baking these cookies sort of feels like bringing the world a little bit closer. Today I'm going to show you how to make my saffron biscotti with chocolate. Biscotti is one of my favorite cookies around the holidays because they are easy to make and they also ship and store really, really well. I think saffron is a really special, delicious spice. I have a dear, dear, dear friend who lives in Sweden, and over the years visiting her in Sweden, I learned about how they use a lot of saffron in their baked goods. And I actually had saffron biscotti from Sweden, so that's where this idea came from. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is bloom our saffron in a little bit of vodka. So I have a tablespoon of vodka. If you don't have vodka, you could use tequila or gin or just something sort of clear. And that's, you can see immediately it's starting to get yellow because saffron is water soluble. So you want to bloom it in a little bit of alcohol or water. But we'll let that steep for 15 minutes. And in the meantime, we can mix together our dry ingredients. So I have my all-purpose flour and some sugar, just regular granulated sugar, baking powder, and kosher salt. All into the bowl. Mix that together. They're so easy. It comes together in seconds. So my saffron is really fragrant. You can smell it already. It blooms really quickly in the vodka. The saffron is actually the stamen of a very special crocus, and you can only pick it by hand at a certain time of day, and it takes, so many flowers to get just an ounce of saffron. You could do this by hand. It's sort of a stiff dough, so the mixer actually makes things really, really easy. But if you don't have one, no problem. We'll pour it in. Saffron threads and all. Mix it. Oh, gotta plug it in. And now we can add our bittersweet chocolate. The bitterness of the chocolate works really well with the saffron. So I like to use a nice dark chocolate. This dough doesn't have any additional fat except for the chocolate and the eggs, it gets really, really crisp. That's how biscotti dough stays really crisp, unlike other cookies that have a lot of butter in them and stay sort of soft. Okay, so I just divided my dough in half, and I'm gonna roll them into 8-inch logs. Like this. The chocolate sort of makes it break apart a little, but you can just smush it back together, no problem. For about 8 inches. Yeah. Maybe a little longer. Okay. Like that, and then we'll move it to this rimmed baking sheet. Like that. They're going to grow about 1 inch on either side, so you want to make sure to leave ample space around them, otherwise they will connect in the oven. So now we get to finish our logs. I have a little bit of egg white, and I'm using that as an egg wash, and this is gonna make my biscotti shiny, which is not essential, but the good thing is it helps the pearl sugar stick. If you don't have pearl sugar, you could use sanding sugar, or even just granulated sugar would be nice. If you wanted to add a little something, it's not essential, but I find that all those cute little touches make a prettier cookie in the end. And now these guys can go into a 350-degree oven until they are puffed and dry. Okay, so this is a log of biscotti that I have done its initial bake and let it cool completely. So now it's time to slice it and get it into the oven for its second bake. And that's what really makes your biscotti super duper crunchy. That's my favorite part of biscotti. So I'm just slicing it about 3/4 of an inch thick with a serrated knife. You could do them thinner or thicker, however you like it. I think of biscotti sort of as toast in cookie form. Toast is one of my favorite foods on the planet. So now these guys aren't gonna spread again, so you can put them really close to one another on the sheet. So now these are gonna go back into your oven, 325 degrees for about, I think it's probably 15 to 20 minutes, just until they're nice and crisp and firm. You can sort of feel it right now in the center, and it's ever so slightly soft, and once you put them in the oven, that softness will be gone. I like to have them with a cup of tea and a book. That's basically my favorite afternoon activity, so that's what I'll be doing later. Let's taste one. Can you hear how crunchy that is? The cookies themselves are sweet, but you get this extra little crunchy sweetness from the top. I think they kind of have it all. My advice to bakers is just to trust yourself, because the truth is, if you sort of just read the directions out, read them out before you start baking and sort of break it down into components that make sense to you, the job is very easy. And the truth about baking is it's not as hard as people think it is. It's actually a lot simpler. You just have to take it step by step and use recipes from people you trust. That's number one, probably. Today I'm going to show you how I make Linzer cookies. So I make the cookies with walnuts and a little bit of chocolate, and then I fill them with Biscoff spread, which is basically this delicious spread made from speculoos cookies, Biscoff cookies. The first time I ever had a Biscoff cookie was on a plane, probably maybe 10 years ago, not even that long ago. And so to me, the flavor of Biscoff cookies just tells me I'm traveling, and traveling is my favorite thing to do in the world. And this year, probably traveling is not gonna happen, so I'm gonna make these cookies to remind myself of being on a plane on my way to a fancy destination. So the first thing we have to do is just grind up our walnuts and chocolate, and I'm using the food processor for this. So walnut halves, a little bit of bittersweet chocolate, and then I always add my sugar at this point too, because I want to grind it up really fine, but I don't want to end up with walnut butter, even though that sounds pretty delicious. Beautiful walnut chocolate sugar. I have to say, this looks so delicious. I might want to use that for something else. But for today, we're making cookies. So to that, I'm adding salt and cinnamon. Cinnamon to me feels really classic in a Linzer cookie, so I went with that. It smells really good. Okay, now we'll do our butter. So this is quite a lot of room temperature butter into our mixture. That's going to make our cookies super tender and soft. Okay. To that, we're going to add our flour, all-purpose flour, 1 large egg yolk, and some vanilla extract. We're just going to blend this until we get a nice combined dough. You'll see it. I'm just dividing it into 2, and the reason I'm doing that is simply just to make the rolling process a little easier, so it doesn't need to be exact. I also want it to chill sort of fast, so the smaller you make your balls and the thinner you make your discs, the faster it will chill. Okay, so now these guys can go into my fridge to chill and harden up for about, I would say, 30 minutes to an hour. So I have my dough, it's been chilled. And I'm gonna roll it between 2 pieces of parchment because it's a super soft and sticky dough. You could do it with flour. I don't wanna add a lot of flour to my cookies and make them extra dry and tough. So we're gonna roll this out into about 1/8 of an inch, which is pretty thin. I like these cookies really thin because you're gonna have 2 layers of them plus filling. So you really don't want it to be super, super thick. So 1/8 of an inch feels right to me. It does make them a little bit delicate. So if you'd like to make them thicker, you certainly can. And this is also why we ground the chocolate and the nuts down really finely, because if you have really big pieces of nuts and chocolate at this point, rolling it very thin would be impossible. I always rotate my dough when I roll and never go over the edge with your pin, because that makes really skinny ends. You want it all to be uniform. So all your cookies are the same size. So I have this is probably like a 2 1/4 inch cookie cutter. You could use a fluted cutter if you wanted, make it extra fancy. I'm just doing a regular cutter. So I'm going to use a little star on every other cookie, because that's going to be the top. And then I also have a little heart. We'll do both. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. Like that. Okay. And now this is so soft. So I like to slip it onto a cutting board like that, and then pop it into my freezer for a few minutes. So here are my cookies. They're nice and cold, so I can use an offset spatula to sort of keep them out of the dough, like this. And if they weren't cold, they wouldn't keep their shape, and they still taste delicious, but they wouldn't look as good. So, and it makes it really hard when they're warm to push out the center cutout. I want them to be sort of delicate in your mouth. If they're too thick, they feel too dense to me. These guys aren't going to spread too much, so it's pretty much okay if you want to put them close together. Okay, and now these can go into a 350-degree oven for about 8 to 12 minutes until they're nice and dry and golden brown. Golden brown, as much as you can tell with a brown cookie. So now we are going to fill our Linzer cookies. Typically, Linzer cookies are filled with jam. They're made with almonds, and then they're filled with raspberry jam or whatever your favorite jam is. So now I'm going to top each of my cookies with a little biscotti spread, and I have put this in a little ramekin and just popped it in the microwave for 1 to 2 seconds if you want to soften it up just a little bit to make it easier to spread. So I'm just going to put a little dab in each one to start. Looks so good. This stuff is good. They also make a chunky one apparently, which I've never had, but it sounds pretty great to me. I don't think you need very much. It's very sweet, so I think just a little dab will do, as they say. Like that. And then I'll spread it out. My gosh, what if you did Nutella and biscotti inside? That'd be good, right? Okay, so now I'm just spreading it a little bit. You can see it's a pretty thin layer. That's how I like them, but you know, you do you. And now we can dust our beautiful tops. Beautiful. Now all we have to do is top our little cookies. Hope I have enough tops. To do the math correctly. Don't they look so cute? Shall I try one? Okay. Try this one on top. Mmm. Mmm. The cinnamon really comes through. The walnut sort of add a savory edge that sort of balances out the biscotti spread. It's a really good cookie, and it's so delicate. It's a really soft, really tender sort of shortbread cookie. So these are perfect for the holidays because that confectioner's sugar with a little cutout makes them super duper festive.
I'm Sharma. I'm a cookbook author, a recipe developer, and a food photographer. I started out in molecular genetics as a scientist and eventually ended up leaving my career to work as a pastry cook. I also started a blog called A Brown Table, and I eventually became the columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, writing a recipe-based food column. After that, I wrote a couple of cookbooks. My first cookbook was Season, and my second cookbook is The Flavor Equation. One of the things I like to do with my recipes is draw in inspiration from the experiences that I had growing up in India, as well as the experiences that I've had now as an adult living in America. And to me, that's the most important part of my work, is kind of showing this nexus where flavor comes together. Everybody loves a good chocolate chip cookie. Today, I'm going to make one of my favorite chocolate chip cookies, which are a play on one of my favorite ingredients, that's Nutella. The first time I tasted Nutella was as a child in India. One of my aunts had come from America and brought me a jar of Nutella, and I remember going through the jar within a week. All I did was slather it on white bread, and it was the best taste ever. I had never tried chocolate that could be spread, kind of like butter, like a sweet butter, but it was even better because it had chocolate in it. I love that combination of hazelnuts and chocolates. You know, both of them are so fragrant, and that's what I've replicated in these cookies. So these cookies are gluten-free. They're made with hazelnut flour, and they've got chocolate chips in them, a little bit of ginger for that spicy bite, and black pepper for a little bit of heat. I'm going to start preparing the dough for my hazelnut chocolate chip cookies, starting with the hazelnut flour, muscovado sugar. You can use dark brown sugar or also jaggery, which is an unrefined sugar that's used in Indian cooking, baking powder, baking soda, a little bit of salt, and a good dose of freshly ground black pepper. So this feels a little bit random, it's all over the place, and that's what I love about chocolate chip cookies, that they shouldn't feel perfect. There should be a little bit of these different shapes and sizes in there. So make a little well in the middle, and then pour in the whisked egg, the melted butter, and the hazelnut extract, followed by the chocolate chips and the crystallized ginger. I really love the taste that comes with crystallized ginger. It's sweet, it's a little bit chewy, and I use it a lot in my baking, especially in cookies. So in these chocolate chip cookies, even though you've got the hazelnuts and the chocolates, the crystallized ginger has a powerful bite that stands against these strong flavors. And I'm going to start by mixing everything together. Initially, this mixture will be a little stiff and hard, but it quickly comes together. You don't need to add any more liquids to this. Now that my cookie dough has come together, it's time for me to shape my cookies. I'm going to take a little bit of cookie dough in my palms and then shape it into a rough ball, and then flatten it into a rough 2-inch disc, and then place them on a cookie sheet that I've previously lined with parchment paper. I'm shaping these cookies all to the same size because I want them to all cook at the same time, and so they cook evenly. Wrap with a layer of plastic foam and leave that in the freezer for about 10 minutes to 30 minutes so that the cookies, the fat in the cookies actually firms up, and you'll get a better cookie crust, which is part chewy but also part crispy. Now that my cookies have firmed up in the refrigerator, I'm going to unwrap and remove the plastic film, and I am going to bake the cookies in my oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 minutes till the cookies spread. My cookies are now done. The entire kitchen smells like Nutella with the smell of cocoa and hazelnuts. I'm going to let these cool on a wire rack before I dive right into them. I grew up on the west coast of India in a city called Bombay, which is now called Mumbai. My mom's family comes from a former Portuguese colony called Goa, where since it's a coastal city, you have a lot of seafood influences besides the Portuguese influence on the culture as well as the food. So you have a lot of coconut, a lot of seafood, a lot of meat. Growing up in India, Christmas was a very big part of our holiday celebrations. Each year my family would come together and we would meet at my maternal grandmother's house. We would all sit around a really large wooden oval table, and every year, a couple of weeks before Christmas, my mom and my aunts would get together and everyone would make Christmas sweets and Christmas cookies. That was a very important part of getting ready for Christmas. And come Christmas Day, we'd get all the sweets ready, and then we would deliver the sweets to friends, family, and neighbors. Now, as an adult, even though I live far away from my family, it's been a fun way for me to kind of play on these things again and celebrate it with my family and friends that do live here or close by in America. I'm going to make my Semolina coconut cookies, which are also called bolinos in India. This is a classic cookie that is eaten during Christmas, and that's why I love it, because it brings back all those warm memories of me with my family making these cookies from scratch, putting the little notches inside the cookie before it goes into the oven. So I'm very excited to make these. The first step to preparing these cookies is to grind half of the coconut mixture down. I'm using unsweetened desiccated coconut. I'm going to fold that with the other coconut that wasn't ground into a fine powder, and then we'll keep that aside. I'm going to take equal parts of water and equal parts of sugar, heat them together till the sugar dissolves, and use that as a syrup. As soon as the sugar dissolves in the water, I'm going to add my ghee. If you don't have ghee, you can also use unsalted butter. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt here. The reason why I'm making a simple syrup to go into this cookie dough, it might seem a little unusual, but there's a reason for that. The reason is because we're using semolina and we're using coconut. Both of these ingredients have very different textures, and adding a liquid helps these ingredients absorb the flavors much better through the hot water. I'm going to fold that together well so everything absorbs, and cover that and let it rest for a couple of minutes to several hours. I'm going to add my coconut extract and my ground green cardamom. Now I'm going to add our eggs, which is a mixture of egg yolks and an egg white. I'm going to fold this mixture into the dough that's been resting. Now that my dough is soft and pliable and easy to work with, I'm going to start shaping the cookies. To do this, I'm going to take about 2 tablespoons of the cookie dough, shape it into a disc that's about 1 inch in diameter. My mom, before marriage, she started collecting a lot of cookbooks and articles from Women's Weekly and all those magazines, and she had saved them, and I used to go through those because I thought it was really fascinating with all the photos and seeing what everyone else is eating in the world, but we weren't eating at home, and that kind of pushed me in that direction to, she's never going to cook all this, I'm just going to do it. To make the crisscross pattern on top of the cookie, I'm going to take the blunt end of a knife, and I won't go all the way through the cookie. I'm just going to press very gently on the surface of the cookie, not go all the way through. This helps the cookie rise and not split while it bakes in the oven, but it also gives a beautiful crisscross pattern on the cookie as it bakes. And it doesn't matter if you make more than 4 lines. The main thing is just not to go too deep. I'm going to bake them in my oven, which is set at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and cook them for about 25 to 30 minutes so the tops and the edges are light golden brown. My entire kitchen right now smells of toasted coconut and cardamom, and the scent is so sweet. I think it's the perfect scent for the holidays. Thanks for joining me. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.